change to a landscape of high sensitivity. That's the sort of level of effect that you would expect to get in national parks, national landscapes, designated landscapes, maybe locally designated landscapes, or valued landscapes. It's an agreed matter that we're none of those. So we're at a lower level of landscape value than those. And then taking that a step backwards, Mr. Petro talks about the magnitude, both year 1 and year 15 as being high adverse. I think it's helpful just to look at the layout, which you can find in CD 13.2. It's obviously part of this is the latest layout, so this is probably the best one to look at.
So this is the one that's attached to your rebuttal.
That's
this right. The one
yep.
that Mr. Petro accepted. Now he's looked at it, that actually there would be enough space for trees, etc.
Do you have it, ma'am? Excellent. So when we're talking about magnitude, obviously magnitude has various components to it, but obviously when you're looking at the scheme here, you can see that it's not kind of covering the whole site, it's covering a part of the site. It's introducing housing next to an area that has housing. So the relative change, yes, it's a change, clearly there's a change. We're changing from an undeveloped grassland to introducing housing, but then there's a scale. So if you're introducing that into a totally greenfield scenario with no other housing nearby, then that is a greater magnitude of change. And if you're introducing it across the whole site, that's a greater magnitude of change. So in my mind, that the fact that there's a large proportion of the site to which development is not being introduced, and where we are introducing it, it's in the context of other housing. The degree of change, there's more change that is possible that would put it into the highest bracket. So that's why we choose a medium magnitude of change. Because also where the development is located is in the less sensitive parts of the site. So the more sensitive parts of the site are those higher areas, the northeastern corner, which is the northern edge that's closer to that's higher up the slope, that's more visible in long distance views. That part of the site is the only changes there are the public open space. Now, Mr. Petro was saying that he thought that in itself was an adverse change. I disagree with that. I think the landscape enhancements are undoubtedly improvements because hedgerows are being restored. What is currently a very species poor grassland is to be a species rich grassland. There's new planting being introduced. There's a new community orchard being introduced. These are quite substantial. This is still it's not a public park. These aren't mown formal parklands with ornamental beds. This is very much native planting, a semi-rural approach. So it's taking what's there as the framework of historic hedgerow patterns, taking that, reinforcing it, and then introducing. I mean, the orchard is a new feature, but one I think that's characteristic of this area. That is a beneficial improvement to the landscape and to the experience of that landscape. So when you visit site again, you'll see it's at the moment it's a sort of single open field. It was arable. It's currently sort of species poor grazed grassland. The features that are being introduced or proposed to be introduced would I think deliver beneficial improvements to that landscape. So I dispute the fact that those landscape improvements would be harmful to the landscape. I think they would be, and we worked really hard to create something that we thought was sensitive to the landscape context, and indeed it's never been disputed before that the landscape proposals were, I think they're wholly appropriate for the site. So going back to magnitude of change, I think there's the changes that are improvements. There's development on a proportion of the site that's of lower sensitivity. All of those bring me to the conclusion that this isn't at the top end. It's at the there's clearly change. There's noticeable change, but it's not affecting the whole site, and it's certainly affecting it's not affecting the highly sensitive parts, and it is, you know, it's housing next to existing housing. The Abbey View development already extends a bit into that, sorry, into that northern space, and you know, it relates to that as well.
All right, good. Then I'm going to please move to the summary effects on visual receptors. And again, I don't think there's any disagreement between you and Mr. Petro in terms of the susceptibility. It's the value, isn't it, of the receptors where there is a difference. He puts it at high,
yeah,
and you put them, I think, at medium, don't you?
I do. That's right. Yeah, I mean, I'm slightly. I mean, what Mr. Petro was saying is he thought they were locally valued, and that to me would put it at a medium level. You know, if it's of regional or national importance, then I would put it as high value. But we're dealing, you know, they're pleasant views, but they're not protected views. They're not sort of identified anywhere as key views. So I think medium value is the appropriate calibration of the value of them.
And he sought to justify his high value, receptor value, on the basis that these were immediately available to residents in the urban area and well used. Is that, in your experience, sufficient to attribute a high value to the receptors?
No, those aren't attributes that I would normally bring into when I'm assessing the value of a view. They wouldn't be, that's unusual to, you know, to take that into consideration.
And I mean, you've set out, and we looked at it with Mr. Petro, the value table that you have at your table 1.4 in the LVA. Mm-hmm. I mean, high would be designated views of national or regional importance, views of noted importance to sites of national importance, scheduled monuments, AONBs, etc. Does that,
again,
these
that's what I mean. I think they're at the higher end of the scale, and that's not where we're sitting. We're in the medium level.
All right, and if you're right, and it is medium, what does that do in terms of the significance of the effects?
So what that does is, obviously, I think we're in agreement that footpath users have high susceptibility to change, but obviously with a lower value, then we're talking about a medium high sensitivity rather than a high sensitivity. So in terms of assessing the importance of the effects, you're dealing with a receptor of slightly lower sensitivity than I think Mr. Petro was suggesting.
All right. Now, I was going to propose that you take us to some of the visualizations, but I'm just having a second thought about that, madam, and whether or not you are actually going to be assisted by looking at visualizations that you've had in...
Well, Mr. Lisson, this is your case to make, so if you feel that I would be, then I don't want you to not do that.
Okay, well, let's do it briefly then. In terms of the landscape effects, Miss Eade, can you just identify the visual material that you particularly want to draw attention to, please?
Well, there's obviously the site layout master plan that you have got before you already from the rebuttal. I think that's really important, because that you know, just shows how the landscape, how the development fits within the site, and it shows specifically the large separations between the development area and the footpaths. I disagree with Mr. Petro. He said he doesn't think that the mitigation of the big setback, the setting it down on the lower land, all the planting that's proposed, the new community orchard, the screen planting, all of that, to me, makes a big effect in mitigating the impacts on the, sorry, straying from the question there, but I'm talking about the rights of way now, but in terms of impacts on the visual impacts on the footpaths. Apologies.
Okay, we were on landscape. So is any particular...
I think, as I said, the illustrative master plan is one image, and we could call up the AVRs, which are CD 1.40.
1.40.
Ma'am, just to clarify, when you, these are the correct visualizations. I think there's one document with a different version in, but when you're looking at visualizations, the CD 1.40 is the correct set. So there is, I think there might be an appendix in, I think maybe the RVIA or a different document, which doesn't have the correct one, but please use the CD 1.40 for that.
Oh, can I just, yes, I've been obviously looking at the wrong ones. So the ones in the LVA are not correct.
Then they are an earlier version, yes. Apologies. It got substituted at the time as just before planning committee because the parameters changed slightly. And for somehow the wrong document got uploaded.
Are you referring to the March 2024 LVA?
Yes. Yes. So the correct AVRs are the ones in CD 1.40.
All right. So perhaps using PDF references.
Mm-hmm.
Which ones would you particularly draw the inspector's attention to?
So I think, yes, if you go to PDF page 7.
Taken from the northern part of the site.
Taken from the northern part of the site, looking towards the town. I think that's useful. That's the baseline photograph. What that shows there is obviously the clear influence of the Abbey View development in those views that is already there. This is not an unspoiled open landscape without any development. This is a previously developed landscape which has been previously developed with an urban edge. You can see the Abbey View development and the university, and then there's the sort of glimpsed view to the church tower.
That's the baseline.
That's the baseline position. Then we have two images, one at year 8 and one at year 1 and one at year 15. Obviously showing that this is obviously an outline application, so the actual format might change, but these are dwellings these images are based on the illustrative scheme. What that demonstrates, sort of in landscape terms, is that you maintain that sense of openness, the open foreground with the views across the valley to the other side of the town, and it also shows this kind of the church tower still being visible in that landscape, and I guess the change to the landscape is you see more houses, but you already saw, if you compare that with the baseline photograph, you always saw, if you look at the previous one, that was there, that was very much a feature of the views currently, and the landscape of the urban edge. And what we see on PDF page 8 is the bringing that foot closer, but still not fundamentally, I think, changing the character of that area.
That's year 1.
And then by year 15, I mean, obviously, there's huge potential. There's a lot of space on this site. There's huge potential to introduce landscape mitigation and planting, which will soften the edges and the urban edge of the development. And again, still, that this is how I justify that the change, the character of the site is fundamentally it's still got housing and open space in it, but it's just bringing the housing further up the slope.
I mean, is it the intention to try and screen the development altogether?
No, I mean that would be inappropriate. I think we're not looking at solid planting screens. That's not what anybody I would suggest. I mean, obviously the detailed scheme would be agreed with the local authority at reserve matter stage, but as you can at the moment, you see through the planting on the northern edge of the town, and you see the Abbey View behind, and it would be a similar relationship that would be being created. But I see the vegetation as playing a role of softening rather than screening.
Good. 7 minutes left, please. So let's turn to the visual receptors, please.
I did say past, just so that you,
No.
everybody can take a breath and.
That'd be Volvo and intelligence. Right. Visitors, visual receptors. So table 6.1 in the statement of common ground. Again, relatively limited disagreement. It's essentially the footpath users, to some extent, the open space to the west of the site. But in terms of the footpath users, again, I mean, how helpful is Mr. Petro's evidence when he provides no analysis of either the value or indeed the the susceptibility in order to arrive at sensitivity?
Not very. I think, as I say, Glivia, it's very clear. You need to give that transparency to explain how you reach that position, which we do in the LVIA that quite clearly says why we think how we reach a medium high sensitivity.
And for him to reach the high sensitivity that he does in terms of those footpath users, what typically would those receptors, what kind of environment would those receptors have to be in?
That would be a high value views. I mean, typically those would be in the sort of the higher value landscapes with higher scenic qualities that have been, those scenic qualities have been recognised in their protection as protected landscapes.
Okay, and again, I think you've touched on this, and by reference to the illustrative master plan produced as part of your rebuttal proof of evidence, in terms of the magnitude of effect, you were started on this, and then we came back to landscape. Do you want to just finish that off?
Yes, sorry. So just looking at that again, I think it's helpful having that in front of you.
CD 13.2.
That's right. So just on the eastern side, we have the St Swithin's Way. I think Mr. Petro suggested that was a national foot trail. It's not one of the national trails. It's a promoted recreational route, but it's not a national trail. There's only a few trails in the country that have that status. And as you can see, the development is to the west of that. The footpath goes through the community orchard. There's a lot of space on both sides of it. If you're moving in a northerly direction, you still maintain those open views up across the site to the north, to the open countryside. And then in the opposite direction, obviously, there will be visibility of the housing to one side of the view, but there's a generous setback. So it's not the case which you get in some developments when you have very close proximity views or major changes. I mean, I think walking through the orchard that's going to bring with it improvement. Brings with it visual interest as well. So that's the St Swithin's footpath. So and then to the north, we have which way around is it? The footpath.
Running east-west.
94, that's right. Yes, yeah. And again, we can as you saw in the visualization we looked at for viewpoint 1B, you've still got the long views over the valley. A lot of the key features of that view are being preserved. So you've still got the long distance views across the valley. You've still got the views of the church tower. You've still got the open space in the foreground, and you've still got housing in the middle ground. What the change is that you've got more housing closer to you, but there's the potential to mitigate that with additional planting, both immediately by the around the housing, but then also in the open space to the north will I think over time have a significant role in reducing those impacts.
Obviously a different view of Mr. Petro, because he says there's really no change.
He says that he doesn't think it'll have any effect, which I find surprising. I think with the amount of planting that could and would be introduced on a site this size, as you can see in the illustrative scheme, there's the potential there to not have a full planted tree belt. I don't think that's appropriate, but you can definitely soften the effect of that built form over time.
Okay, and are there any other of the visualizations you particularly want to draw the inspector's attention to in CD 1.40? We looked at 7, 8 and 9.
We could look at the viewpoint 3, which is the view from the west from it's actually from the children's play area, but there's also the public open space to the north of that. And we've got the baseline existing view. A PDF page 11. So you can see, actually, if you go to start off on PDF page 10, actually, because that's the wider context, and that what that shows is obviously you in those views from the west, you do see the Abbey View development quite clearly. It extends up into this area. So that's on the right hand side of the view. You can see those houses there and the children's play area. So, you know, this is a developed landscape in the foreground and to the right of the view. And then there's a sort of more focused view on PDF page 11 and then PDF 12. I mean, what I think this demonstrates quite well is the way the proposals use the topography of the site. You'll have seen when you've been to the site, there's really, you know, quite significant topographical change, and the way that the housing is sitting on the lower parts of the site. So you keep that treed open horizon, that open space beyond, that's not being lost at all. That's one of the kind of key features, and that's still there. What you obviously do have is more housing in the view as well.
Okay, and then just because
sorry, I should have just then view 13, if you're obviously starting to see the effect of the planting, just softening the effect of the housing. Yeah, and I suppose what I would say is, you know, that change is not what I would call incongruent. You know, this is a view in which you already see housing. I don't think that's the scale of change is not so great, because it's what you would expect to see on the edge of the settlement.
All right. Are there any other visualizations you particularly want the inspector to have a look at?
No, I mean, the inspector should look at all of them. I mean, I think the rest of them actually demonstrate the way you can't see it from the minimal landscape. You just can't see it from the castle keep, the very north from the valley floor. And it's all set out. Do take some time to read the LVIA, because that goes through each of the receptors and gives you the full narrative of what the changes are and how we've reached the judgments that we reached.
Okay, good. Now, I think the only other matter I wanted you to just perhaps explain is in paragraph 2.18 of your proof of evidence. You reach a slightly different conclusion about the assessment of a medium landscape sensitivity arrived at in the Farnham landscape character assessment. That's at 2.17, 2.18, I think, isn't it?
I think it was the landscape value I was questioning. We're in agreement that it's an area of medium. I agree that I think it's medium landscape sensitivity.
Sorry, my apologies.
It's the landscape value, which that landscape character assessment concluded a high landscape value.
And do you want to just briefly explain why it is, given that you're disagreeing with a landscape assessment, a published landscape assessment, why you're disagreeing with that, and whether that receives any support from Glivia?
Yeah, I think there's 2 points to this. Partly it's the methodology that was used, and partly it was when it was carried out. So in terms of the methodology, it's really quite an outdated approach, because it uses a numerical scoring system. So it goes through a number of different aspects that contribute towards value, and then scores it and then adds it up. And then because it fits within, it just goes into the bracket. It has a score of 22. So it's the very, very lowest one for the areas of high value that then assigns it as high value. The best practice now is very much to move, landscape isn't about numbers. It's not something you can mathematically assess at all. It's very much more of a professional judgment, and it's about the narrative and the explanation as to the features that contribute to the value that then help to inform your judgments on it. So I think, nowadays you would not see a landscape character assessment using a numerical scoring system. And indeed, I think the way they've done it in this particular one, they've got a very large bracket for high value, which is much larger than the brackets for medium and low. So it seems strange. Added to that, since that has been done, there have been some changes in the landscape. So both the Abbey View development and the university development. So the university next door has had 4-storey buildings being introduced, and obviously the Abbey View development has come in as well. So that has undoubtedly, changed the urban influences on the landscape have become greater. That's just the natural consequence of the changes to the adjacent area that affects the character of LCA4 as well. So I think there's been, it's different to how it was. Plus, I still think, in a general sense, I also think to conclude that this area is high landscape value, which is the same as the areas that are in the AGLVs, that fully in the AGLVs. This is an area that's clearly of lower value than those. So I think, to my mind, it's that gives over too much weight to the value of the landscape.
Good. Those are all the questions I have. Thank you very much, Ms. Eade. Thank you, Madam.
Ms. Eade, thank you very much for your evidence, Chief. And Mr. Green will cross-examine you first thing tomorrow morning when we reconvene. I've got some housekeeping matters to raise, which I will do, and then I'll ask if anybody else does as well. You may as well stay sitting there, Ms. Eade, rather than go anywhere. I've received an email with the completed section 106, so thank you for that. I would love a paper copy. If the council could get me a paper copy, please. The conditions, I haven't received an updated condition. It's just the reason for condition 17 that's missing, but I need that for the, for completeness. Councillor Powell, during your representation earlier, you referred to some documents, so I'd be grateful if they could be sent to the council. Thank you. And Mr. Litton, you referred when you were cross-examining Mr. Petro to that landscape. Yeah. And again, if that could be circulated and submitted electronically, that would be helpful. Thank you. I don't have any other housekeeping issues, other than obviously we will be reconvening tomorrow morning at 9:30. Is there anything that anybody wants to raise, Mr. Litton?
It's just the Section 106 agreement which you've been sent. I think I'll be right in saying that it's been executed by Surrey County Council on the basis it was agreed. But I think Waverley came back this morning and said they were unhappy that it still contained references to contributions possibly made to Farnham Park rather than Church Crookham. And so they would like all those references to Farnham Park taken out. So I think that is still to be done.
Right.
But that's not a point of disagreement. I think that's just an editing exercise.
Okay.
We'll have to then have a discussion about how we then reflect that in a document that Surrey County Council have already signed. But again, that's sort of detail, I'm afraid.
Okay.
I suspect whether we will have to produce a brand new document, which will have to go back to Surrey County Council for them to sign, or whether they are happy for it to be amended and just initial the amendments, I don't know. But it's a process point.
But it's agreed, is it? So the amendments that the council have put forward are agreed by the appellant.
Yeah, so we're happy to delete all references to Farnham Park Sang.
Okay.
But we just have to do that editing exercise. So I think your copy is not the finally agreed one. It still has references to Farnham Park.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the update. Mr. Green, was there anything you wanted to raise?
Not for me, no.
No, all right. In which case,
just very quickly, apologies. Just again, in relation to housekeeping, we are trying to agree and are very close to agreeing a position on the Farnham neighbourhood plan allocations that you mentioned earlier, just in terms of giving you the latest update on each of those.
it hasn't been yet. Okay.
Yeah, there's just one very small matter that I need to just check with Chris, but we'll get that. Sorry, Mr. Sampson. I will get that. We'll get that to you just as soon as we can.
Super. Thank you for remembering. I did have it here, but somehow I managed to ignore it. Thank you very much. So thank you for today. We will adjourn at 5:20 and I will see you all in the morning at 9:30 in here. Thank you.